Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Leap. I am every week, I'm excited to be here to bring a new transformational story to this space and knowing and believing that it'll reach whoever needs to hear it. So today, I am very excited to introduce Caroline Baird. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
You are correct.
And let me just tell you a little bit about our guest today. Caroline is a transformation coach and leadership mentor. She works with individuals to explore their passions and strengthen their confidence. And she also works with organizations to build the skill set of their teams in this ever-changing world. She looks forward to sharing this passion and mentoring people to make great strides toward attaining their dreams, and all with humor and grace. Prior to her coaching business, she has over 20 years of HR experience as an executive for large corporate retailers. Caroline has a knack for making meaningful connections with audiences. She has an appetite for helping others maximize their potential, resulting in more impactful communication, connection, and confidence so they can make an influential impression on the world. So all of that sounds just so lovely. And we had the opportunity to talk before recording the episode. So I am very excited for you to bring your transformational story to this space for listeners. So welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So let's jump right into your story. Why don't you go ahead and start with you've had two pretty significant losses. When I think about grief and loss, that is quite expansive. It's not just death of a person, but death also of a life as we know it, and you've had both. So can you just jump into the story wherever you'd like to begin?
Sure. So, yeah, I would say a very happy, positive individual through my life who wanted to change the world for a better place, always connected very well with people, and always enjoyed being out in nature and just enjoying life. Things I felt were going along very well. I was married, had two beautiful children, and surprisingly, after 27 years, found out that my now ex and I were going to be parting ways. And that was in 2017. And it hit me hard because it was shock. And so, obviously, one of the steps that you go through when you're grieving, the first one being shock. And then, of course, the guilt of what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? And then it did get into a little bit of anger around the situation itself. And really, the rock in my family for me, or helping me get through this separation that was not amicable, was my dad. And my dad had always been the strength in my life. He was very supportive, positive, really wanted to make sure that people enjoyed their life. And if you wanted something that was tangible, he was always supportive for you to do it because his attitude was, why wait?
And so your dad, I want to slow down
Sure.
because your dad was, as you said, your rock during
Mm-hmm.
the time that you were shocked by the separation with your husband. Such tremendous. It's what we call a tower moment in tarot. I don't know if you do tarot at all, but really when the rug literally is pulled out from underneath you and you feel like your entire life is crumbling around you.
Correct.
And so
Yes.
you relied heavily on your dad. It's just my mom passed and I have my dad, and I talk to my dad about everything now too. It doesn't matter how old we are, I swear. So your dad was your rock through your separation.
Absolutely. And he just helped me to believe, Susan, that things were going to be okay. First he wanted to make sure, is that something you want? Where are you at? But was very good at helping me through it because, of course, it's easy to say, I know the steps I would tell somebody what to do, but when you're in it, it's always hard to see yourself. So my dad and I had many conversations around what that would mean, how it would impact my adult children, and just what we could do to support each other as a family. And so it was super important to have my dad in my life. Because I found a lot of other people were judgmental or had a very strong opinion, where my dad didn't do that. So that's probably why I enjoyed having conversations with my dad. And he was able to help me through a lot of it. The divorce took a fair amount of years. So, like I said, it wasn't amicable. So then in 2020, my dad started to show signs of Alzheimer's, not severe, but severe enough that he wasn't able to continue certain things anymore that he loved to do, but still able to get support. And just around probably 6 months into COVID, my dad was not feeling well one day and was falling off a chair. And so we rushed him to the hospital. And unfortunately, even though, we did everything we could, probably within 2 weeks, he had passed, which was another big shock for us.
And were you through the divorce at this point when your father passed?
No, so we were still in negotiations. And in fact, during the time while my dad was in the hospital, I received papers pushing for the sale of our home, which then meant, I think, which caused even more stress for myself because I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know what was going on with my dad. I didn't know what was going on with the divorce. And now I received legal documents to say we are going to force the sale of the home, which my children and I were living in. And so it just added to the amount of stress or grief that I was dealing with. And at that time, I didn't have my dad to talk to. So it was really difficult because I was trying to be focused on him and his health. But he was, super supportive. And I would say, Susan, he really believed in being a good person. And when my dad passed away, I really started to see that. I started to see from other people, again, this is through COVID, so you couldn't have the typical grieving process. There, funeral, you were only allowed to have X amount of people. It wasn't the regular support that you would get from a community, but the amount of cards and phone calls I received from people that my dad had touched at some point in their life was phenomenal. I had seen truly what a strong, caring person he was, and what an amazing legacy to leave behind, where he had helped people start their careers and grow their own businesses. And it was just very, very touching and eye-opening for me. And I think that's why that one became so difficult for me, on top of the fact that he was my rock in my family through my divorce and my life. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what I mean? I think that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of sort of what will end up being the long-term effects of COVID, and not just with anxiety and depression, but for people around grief who were not able to be there with their loved ones when they died. My sister-in-law, who's my age, also died during COVID, and it's excruciating. But I'm sitting here thinking about you and how beautiful that you had outpouring from people who, sort of just, you already knew how special your dad was, but it feels there's something so special when other people, when you see how many people your loved one has touched.
Right.
And that legacy, which I'm sure had something to do with you reinventing yourself. But before we go there, what was happening for you, on a personal level, with losing your dad during COVID, being still in the midst of this life-altering drama, right, of divorce, because that's what it is. It's just pure drama, I swear. What was going on for you in your own mental health at that point?
Yeah, so and we didn't talk about this pre our call, but when my dad ended up in the hospital and I got those documents, I actually woke up one morning and wasn't able to get out of bed. My body just shut down. So, when you talk about any type of grief, it impacts your body. And so the significance or the impact of two things that were so big for me just had my body shut down. And it was like, nope, we're not continuing anymore. And I was diagnosed with an autoimmune. So I did decide that, this can't be my life moving forward. This is not what I want my life to be. But I also had to accept that I now have this autoimmune for the rest of my life. So that trauma actually triggered it. And then I sat back and decided at one point, enough of this pity for myself. I could either choose to be a victim and go the negative route for the rest of my life, And I decided that's not what I wanted to do. I decided that what I wanted to do was dust myself up, off, pick myself up, and use this as change in my life for the next chapter and what that was going to look like.
But how did you do that? What were the tangible steps? Because when we're in the depths of, I'm going to use despair, you have not used that language, but I
Right.
just imagine the condition that you were in, and when it starts to manifest in a physical way, which grief does. And I mean, I almost want to say that it manifests for everybody in a physical way, even if it's
Mhm.
slight, you may not recognize it. It could just be pure exhaustion, right?
Correct.
It is a physical response or loss of appetite or all of
Right.
the other things. But this idea, I used to call it feeling, the way I've described it is like I had stones in my legs, that my legs were full of stones and I was heavy. My body was heavy with grief. And,
Right.
and that, in that physical manifestation of literally being stopped in your tracks,
Yes.
grief.
Yes.
So my question to you, you said autoimmune, I'm imagining fibromyalgia, maybe.
Yes.
I don't think it's that uncommon. And so my question is, when you said pick yourself up and dust yourself off, what did that look like? Was that one day you were depressed in bed and the next day you popped right out of bed and said,
I
hey,
wish.
I'm yeah, exactly. So talk to us about those very tangible steps that you
Sure.
took.
Sure. So obviously, I talked to friends first who were very supportive. So I have two very close girlfriends, and girlfriends are friends in general that you can share your life with, is really important. So I talked to them. Of course, they can help, but they can only help so much. So I decided I was going to visit a psychotherapist who could help me understand what I was going through and how to deal with certain things, because she was able to help me understand some of the triggers. What was it that was triggering me? And of course, we could have a whole conversation on limiting beliefs and fears, etc. But she helped me through a lot of pieces of that with the marriage piece. So I talked earlier before about, what did I do wrong? What could I have done differently? If you carry that with you, it's like Pandora's box. You shove it down, but it'll come back to visit. So you have to work through those things. And so that was important to me. I got into healing modalities because I'm a big nature buff. I decided that I was going to try a couple of things that I had never tried before and I thought were a little woo woo sometimes, like Reiki. So Reiki was something that I decided I wanted to try because you could do energy healing because everything has energy in this world. You could do energy healing and focus on certain parts of your body. And so I decided I tried it first with a Reiki master who then taught me Reiki because your first level of Reiki is self. So how to do Reiki on yourself. But I loved it so much, I became a Reiki master and just love, love, love how you can help people through energy and calmness and really help them to release a lot of things. And then I also did a ton of meditation. I'm a big meditation and breathing person, breathing guru, if you will. I often would start team meetings with some form of a breathing exercise or short meditation, just to help people to release, calm down, get refocused. And so some of those modalities I continue to do every day. Journaling really helped. I made sure I journaled every day, and it didn't matter what I journaled. If I was feeling down and I was having a bad day and I was beating myself up, it was okay to put that in the journal because it is part of your healing process. You need to release some of those things. I've heard of people, I never did this, but I've heard of people going outside with a pillow and just screaming into the pillow. What you can do to release that anger, that fear, you look for things that you can do to help release those things.
You brought up a couple of really important things. I wrote my dissertation on the healing benefits of writing through grief, loss, and trauma long before my brother died, even. And it's just interesting because there's a lot of science and research behind it. I mean, the research that I did for that dissertation was just fascinating, and from inmates to, then I built a therapeutic writing program for people in prison and kids in juvenile justice, and it's astounding the healing benefits of right? Because it's getting your thoughts out of your head, because
Correct.
it's a wheel, right? It's just a hamster wheel in here. We have to get it out. But the other thing that you just said too, which I love, I mean, all of the pieces, meditation. I what I love is that you went to somebody, you decided to go get help. That is the first, that takes it, that is a huge step in and of itself. And I just want to say,
Absolutely.
and I want to just hug you for that and say, because taking that step when we are really in the midst of crisis takes a lot of courage. It takes energy, because when you start getting into therapy or whatever it is that people do for healing, it takes work, it takes commitment, it takes work, and it's painful to move through painful.
Absolutely. And I'll be super transparent because prior to doing that, when my dad passed away, I'm going to call myself a workaholic. I was committed to not putting any pressure on my team or letting the business down. I went back to work after my dad's passing too quickly. So I think within 2 days of his funeral, I went back to work. And as the director of HR, that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And I actually had a meltdown at the office and decided to take some time off because I knew this was bigger than what I thought it was. And I was surprised, Susan, how many colleagues that I work with that had such a positive impact from my actions. Meanwhile, I'm feeling like I'm letting everybody down, right? And not being the person who I'm supposed to be. And they congratulated me for being an executive in HR and actually saying it's okay to take time to get yourself organized so you can bring your best self forward. Because I knew that's not what I was doing. And that's when I'm obviously, as in being in HR, you talk about employee assistance programs,
Right.
seeing counselors. And I thought to myself, I can't, you have to practice what you preach. And
Yes.
so here's my time to reach out and get some help. And there's nothing wrong with reaching out to get help. Because again, I know what I should tell people, but you can't tell yourself that when you're going through it.
And sometimes, this is interesting. I want to circle back to you about releasing anger. So don't let me forget that when you talked about
Sure.
punching pillows. But what you're saying right now, to walk our talk, or practice what we preach, or all of the other little sayings that are out there. I find that it's sort of like this. It's this double-edged sword where you feel like, well, here I'm teaching this, so I need to be able to practice it. But also, when you're in that position, you're also the rock for a lot of people. And you've, like
Right.
you said, letting them down. It was just a very similar situation where I went back to work and I also had a meltdown, and we were all on video because I've worked remotely now for close to 25 years. And I just burst into tears and I thought, I got to take a leave of absence. Like, I am so far from okay. And I think, we are very fortunate to be in companies that allowed us to, because not everybody has that
Correct.
luxury of being able to take time away from their work. And I have
Right.
such deep compassion for those people who can't. And I think some of the things that you're talking about, for listeners out there who might be like, I do not have the luxury of taking a medical leave from my company to
Right.
do some of these other things they can do,
Absolutely.
like journaling, like meditating. And I'll also say, going back to releasing anger, I love that you said that, because when I ran groups at the Center for Grieving Children, they had what we call a volcano room, and the whole room was padded. And so children and adults, two at a time, could go in and release. Children could play if they wanted to, adults could beat the walls if they wanted to. And it was only 4 minutes. And
Oh,
it was
okay.
4 minutes of intense release of emotion or anger,
Right.
and so you just made me think of things that people who came there, whole families would come, and we would have different groups for different ages. And, but you can take boxes and you can jump on them. We used to have phone books and they could rip the pages out. So I'm just
Right.
offering that for people, that there are safe and healthy ways for you to
Absolutely.
release this intense anger. Because let's face it, when you are going through grief, whatever that loss is, you are going to feel it. You're going to be pissed at some point.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's people that love to run. I'm not a runner, but God bless them. They run more than before. But you do, because if you don't release the anger, the guilt, the shame, the blame, it, like I said, you bottle it up. There's that Pandora's box in you, and you have no control of when that box is going to open at all. And as humans, we tend to go more the negative route than we do the positive route. So the victim mentality, and I don't, I'm sure a lot of listeners have heard of or read the Oz principle, and it's about being above the line or below the line. And so it's okay to go below the line. It's okay to blame somebody. It's okay to play victim. It's okay to finger point. But you don't want to stay down there. That's not a great way
I
to
use
live.
the word stuck. If you do not move emotion and energy through the body, it will get stuck. It's
It
energy. It
will.
has to go
Yes.
somewhere. It has to. It can
Yes.
go in our joints. It can go in our hips. It can go like it can.
Yes.
It turns into dis-ease in the body in
It
some.
does. Yeah. And so you have to release that to be able to at least start to think clearer. And I feel like, we talk about imposter syndrome in my world. And I think that's what we do a lot of times is we have that imposter syndrome when we're going through grief, that we have to behave a certain way. But yet, if you turned around and you said something to somebody you cared about, you would never have that expectation of that individual. So we're always so much harder on ourselves than we are on others. But the releasing of the shame, the blame, the guilt was critical as part of my healing process. And, I did try some energy modalities that didn't do anything for me, and that's okay. But I would say it doesn't mean it's never going to work for you. It didn't at the beginning, but maybe it did now. So, I started to take short breathing exercises or quick little meditations to the office with me. I was better at setting boundaries for myself after I actually was able to release a lot of that so that I could then be my authentic self and try and make an impact and help people to do the same thing.
So let's talk about this next step of your life, because our lives, I think, they're just always unfolding.
Yes.
And we are co-creators of our own lives. Sometimes when we don't feel like we are still always co-creating and drawing into life wherever our energetic field is. It's just what you water grows, what you focus on grows, except
absolutely
the things. So when you made this decision that you were not going to be a victim, you made the first steps to go get yourself some help, and you got into a lot of cool alternative methods of healing, right? From meditation to journaling to all of these to Reiki. You also made a big decision around your professional career. So talk to us about that. You took a leave as director of HR for a huge company.
Yes.
Then, okay, so did you take a 3-month leave of absence?
I did. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Lucky not 3 months, right? Like the big decision to quit, for example. Okay.
Right.
So did you go back to your job? Did you resign then? Like what happened in this 3-month period that you decided to take care of yourself?
Yeah. So after the 3 months, I really focused on, I literally meditated twice a day at minimum. So once in the morning, once at night. I would journal whenever I felt like journaling. I would go for walks. And it's amazing when you're quiet and you're going through walks, even if you're listening to music, the thoughts that come up and the conversations you're having with yourself. And after 3 months, I felt I was good and I was ready to go back. And I loved where I worked. I enjoyed the company. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. And I went back. It was not the same for me anymore. It was a real eye opener for me. And, when we talk.
Well, how were your eyes open? So
yeah,
here it is. You're doing all this work in this 3-month leave. What were you feeling like?
was missing.
Even the week before, what was it feeling like to go back? Was it anticipation? Was it dread? What was going on in your body? Because now you're really learning to listen to your body.
Correct. And I thought I had my boundaries nailed down and I was going to go back to work and I was going to establish my boundaries. These were my boundaries. Yeah, that didn't happen. I went right back into the same mode again, right? Because it's hard when you've done something for so many years to then come back and be this completely different person.
And did you really have no contact with work in this 3 months that you're?
I had a little bit. There wasn't a lot. Like they were pretty good at when you're off, but of course, as the director, they would call me just if they had to work on a particular project or something and ask questions, which was absolutely fine. And of course, I cared for these people. I continue to stay in contact with them, even though I don't work with them anymore.
Right.
Again, I'm love working with humans. I love being with humans. I love helping people live a better life, achieve their goals. What is it you want to do when you will grow up? And I could ask you that if you're 50. That's okay. So I was excited to go back, but after a week in, I knew this just wasn't going to work.
How?
Um,
How did you know?
I was dreading the same over and over situations. So things that you were hoping to set boundaries on, they didn't go. You'd get pushback on some of your boundaries. Well, we don't have enough people to do it. You're going to have to continue to do it. I started to dread, and I don't want to say be angry at the business because I felt like it wasn't supporting me because they were still doing their thing. I had changed and they hadn't. And so I started to dread going in. And I would tell you every Sunday night, you would have those Monday morning blues going, oh, tomorrow's Monday. And I would dread it and I couldn't sleep. And I just thought, this is not how I want to live. This is not what I want my dream of my life to be moving forward. Because now I had lost my dad, was still finalizing my divorce, found out I had an autoimmune that really limited, I'm sure you know a bit about fibromyalgia, but the exhaustion between everything that had happened. But when I lost my dad, I heard of the amazing stories people would tell me about him. And I kept going back to that legacy piece. What was his legacy? The impact that he had on people. And I remember me being young and my dad saying to me, because I always wanted to change the world, I wanted to make it better. And my dad was saying, you can't change the world. And I said, well, I'm going to change my corner of it. I'm going to make this a better place. When I saw his legacy, I was like, what's mine going to be? I don't want my legacy to my children to be that, oh, yeah, mom worked 60 hours a week for how many years? She was a great corporate soldier. I didn't want that. And that's great for some people. That's what they'd like to do. But I realized for me, that wasn't it. And I wasn't helping people the way I wanted to. I wasn't helping them through difficult times or helping them develop to grow their careers because it became very check the box. And so I made the big decision that no, I'm going to leave the corporate world because this is truly what I want to do. And I'm going to start my own coaching business. So I've taken the Martha Beck Wayfinder coaching. I've taken some other things as well. And I just have such passion for it. And I was saying to Susan earlier that one of my taglines that I always use is life is simple. We make it complicated.
Yeah. So how long were you back at work before it takes a lot of courage
Right.
to leave the security of a big job,
Absolutely.
big paycheck and benefit, right? I mean, that's
Right.
the golden handcuffs that we talk about.
Correct.
It keeps us in our job, right? And we always say, one day I'm going to do this, one day I'm
Right.
going to do that. So how long were you back before you really knew in your heart that you had to leave? And then how long did it take you to actually jump?
It was probably about 3 months when I realized this wasn't going to work, and it wasn't going to work for me. Again, it wasn't going to ensure that I could take care of my health long term. And I knew that the corporation, and again, no regrets for going to them, but the corporation wasn't going to be there after I left to support me. So, what was I doing to myself physically that would either shorten or limit what I could do once I left the corporate world and retired? So, if I worked till age 65, then what? And I thought, you know what, this stress is just not working for me. And I did a lot of traveling across Canada and just was like, this isn't for me anymore. I need to slow down, have some calmness in my life, and really live to those boundaries and do what it is I want to do. And I find that if you can do that and be very clear on what it is you're trying to achieve, reach out to people. So I spoke to a lot of coaches. I spoke to people who do meditation, yoga, all sorts of things. And I decided, no, that's definitely what I want to do. And so I'm just trying to calculate roughly, within the year, I had resigned. Yeah.
And
So
then
I
you
made sure I
are,
had all my ducks in a row and put a little savings a piece aside. And I actually, when I left, I ended up taking 2 months off, not even thinking about this business I wanted to create. I was like, I need to take care of me again. How am I going to help people if I'm not in the right energy mode myself?
right.
So, yes.
Yeah, and I love that you say that. One of the things I used to talk to clinicians about, I was a clinical director for many, many years, and even though we can't see our energy field, we are energy. That is what we are. And if our energy is chaotic, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to bring chaos into somebody else's life. It's
Right.
and so with clinicians, I'm like, you have to make sure that you are centered before you walk into a room with your client or with a family. And
Right.
so I love that awareness that, you got your ducks in a row, you saved some money. At this point, had you taken the coaching
I
course?
had taken Martha back. Yes. I took the Martha back probably, let's see, my separation was 2017. Took Martha back 2018, 2019.
Okay.
So knew it was something I wanted. It was something I wanted to do like when I was married, but there was always a reason not to. Let's put it that way.
It just, so your story just gets cooler and cooler because I love that, it's almost like you were preparing,
Mhm.
even though you weren't quite sure what you were preparing for.
The universe always
Exactly. No.
gets you ready for it.
Yeah.
You just have to listen.
It's so
Yes.
true.
Yeah.
So, okay. So now you decide you take a couple of months off. Is this when I'm sure that the thoughts and the ideas were just swirling about, like really trying to focus your energy on what you were going to be doing?
Yes. And I think part of it when I took the 3 months off, plus what I had already done around the healing modalities and seeing a psychotherapist, etc., it also helped me to see a new way to live a life that is very fulfilling, very peaceful, very joyful, very loving. And it allowed me to select these are the things that I so enjoy and need to share. The reason I became a Reiki master wasn't because it was going to help me, because I could have taken level one, which was self Reiki, and be done with it. But I decided that I thought it was way out there. I was like, what is this energy healing with Reiki? It has been around for thousands of years, and I had never really heard of it. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to become a Reiki master. One, because I truly believe in it, but two, because I think we need to educate people more and more. And, I don't want to go too far down the road with medical, et cetera, but when you have a medical issue and you go to a doctor, of course, they're going to prescribe something for you. And there are times you absolutely need prescription, definitely. But there are other ways to take care of your body, your mind, your body, your soul, so that you maybe don't have to take all the medication you're taking, or maybe you have to take it for a short period of time while you're dealing with depression or anxiety. And I just wish the two worlds could combine so that it could be a really amazing, holistic
Eastern and
way of
Western,
healing.
right? If we could just do this, I mean, this is
Right.
right. I agree
Yes.
wholeheartedly.
Yes.
Okay, so you decided that you were going to start your own coaching and you
Yes.
also offer Reiki, obviously. So talk to us about how because I know that we're almost at the top of the hour. So
Mhm.
I know it goes fast, doesn't it? So talk to us about how you started to create your business.
Sure. I really took a look at my journey. And, if I think about the ways I helped people, even when I was in human resources, Susan and I talked about grief. Death obviously is the worst grief you can deal with, but there's so many other forms of grief that we go through. And people have always told me I'm a very positive person. And again, um, I try to be the glass half full as opposed to half empty, and that's work. It really is. Like every once in a while, I forget to be grateful, and so I'll go out and buy myself a couple of flowers just to remind me of the beauty and the gratitude of what we have in this world. But I think it's just more around taking control of our lives and realizing that this way that society tells us to live is not the end all be all. And just taking some time to really gather my experiences and share that with people so that hopefully I can make an impact. And that's really all I want to do is just help people learn from my experiences so that they themselves can live better lives and, not be at near the end of their life having lots of regrets, because that's the worst thing. And it comes quicker than you think.
Yeah, it really does. And so, with your business now, do you work with both organizations and leadership teams and individuals?
Yes. So I will mostly right now individuals. I've just started a organization program. So there's the two pieces. I do life transformation. So any form of transformation that you're going through, loss of a job, empty nester, I help individuals with that. And I'm doing a program actually in February calling the 28 Days of Self-Love. It's all around loving yourself again, because if you can't love yourself, you can't truly love externally. And then I've got a leadership program coming out around there's so many forms of leadership. What type of leader do you want to be? What's your why? How do you communicate clearly? How do you hold people accountable with empathy? I mean, the world's a different place, especially with all the different age groups that we have working for us right now. And I just feel it's something that we don't arm our leaders with who truly want to be good leaders. So I will work with individuals or smaller groups. And then I'm also creating something for businesses that I can tweak towards a business that's more hands-on. So trying to make it more tangible for people to be able to take and then use, because I'm also being in HR, I'm not a person who likes the one and done. It's how do I take this information and make my life better with the information I receive? So I try to help people do that to be able to implement it into their everyday, whether it's work or personal.
And then you also, now I'm just interested in this, you incorporate the principles of Reiki throughout your work. How does Reiki come in? Or is it really separate that you do energy work on people? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, I put it out there that I do it. Not everybody's going to be into it. So, of course, an organization might not be so thrilled about it. But I do teach them breathing exercise, meditations. I'm starting to build some freebies on my site that people can use. And so I also want to teach people about chakras and understanding the connection between their body and listening to their body to tell them what's going on and then dealing with it through Reiki or yoga or meditation or whatever it is that they enjoy, so that they are truly aligned, because only when you are aligned physically can your mind and soul work to its optimum performance, right? So I don't introduce Reiki, like I said, to the corporations, but it is something that I will mention to individuals because they can always book separately with me. Or, like I said, I've been introducing breathing exercises just to get people to come down. It's awesome at the beginning of a team meeting. You just have to do the 4 squares breathing exercise, and people just calm right down, and all of a sudden they're refocused, as opposed to thinking what they just finished at their last meeting and still working on it.
Can you
So
do that with us I have one question that I always end with, but before we get
sure.
to that, can you give us the 4 squares of breathing?
Yeah. So basically, if you see a square in your mind and you're drawing it and keep going round and round, you're taking a breath in, and then on the down, you're letting it out, and it usually through your mouth, and you can release it through a if you want to. Not everybody likes to do that. And then you keep going, breathing in, breathing out. And now I focus on breathe in love, breathe out stress, breathe in love, breathe out anger, breathe in peace, breathe out frustration, breathe in calmness, breathe out anger. And just by doing that, you can use whatever you're feeling with the breathing in. What do you want to bring in? I want to bring in peace, calm, love. Breathing out stress, anger, frustration. It's amazing how that can help you. And if you've got a group, you can even just breathe in and breathe out. And if you do 2 squares, it makes a big difference and it doesn't take long.
I'm smiling because I can hear some of my listeners going, how do I breathe in love and exhale anger? And I just wanted to add some commentary around that too.
Sure.
Sometimes people see that as just, it's an emotion. More people see emotion in color.
Yes.
I see light, I see love in white light.
Yes.
So things like that. So I'm just saying that, you guys, you can get very creative. You don't have
You
to
can.
have to take it super literal. What does anger feel like? What does it look like? Give it some texture. You can imagine it that way.
And I
Okay.
will be adding more and more meditations on my website for free. So feel free to pick them up. It's something I just enjoy doing. And yeah, I offer to my clients all the time, but I wanted to make sure I put some out there. So I'm going to be loading some more. I've got 2 out there right now. We'll be doing more shortly. So those slots there for individuals to pick up and do on their own.
And all of Caroline, all of the ways in which you can connect with Caroline will be in the show notes. As we're wrapping up, here's my last question. So I want you to think about what self-love meant to you prior to this massive transformation that you have gone through.
Mm.
My question to you now is, what does self look like now after this huge life altering experience?
Yeah, and I don't want to say women in particularly because there are men in the same boat, but for me, I have stopped putting everybody else first and me last through self-love. It's I always use the analogy of think about when you go on a flight. The stewardess tells you to put the mask on you first before you help anybody else. You can't be effective in helping others if you aren't taking care of yourself, hence boundaries. And so self love for me now is me first and others afterwards. Now, yes, there are going to be times where that doesn't quite work if there's an emergency or something like that. But I definitely every morning will take care of me and journal and meditate first so that I'm in the right space and can be effective and support the team or community or whoever I'm working with moving forward. So just anchoring in.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
For those of us who are empaths out there, boundaries are particularly hard because we always want to, sometimes we don't even know that we're lacking oxygen, right? Like I love
Right.
of the mass, but sometimes it's not until we're so run down or sick that we even understand that we've run ourselves literally ragged.
Correct.
And so something that has helped me was something that a coach shared with me many years ago now, but when going back to being in your body, really being in your body, that when you're asked to do something, you will feel it first in your body. And
Absolutely.
it's either a hell yes or it's a no. And I've
Yeah.
lived by that, right? And
And I teach that as well. Martha Beck taught me that you will always feel the joy in the same area. You will always feel the negative or the pain in the same area. And so if you can figure out what that is, it's very easy to do. You are right, Susan. It's amazing.
yeah, you'll know. And it's trusting our higher power. It's trusting our intuition that
Right.
it will guide us every time. It's when we start swatting it away, because sometimes those downloads are so quick, we can miss them. We can
Yes.
miss them if we're exhausted, if we're in the midst of chaos, being still, whether that's through meditation. I know a lot of people cringe with the idea of meditation. Meditation does not have to be right. It can be a walking meditation. It can be just walking through the woods in nature. It's
Yeah.
getting quiet. It is shutting out the noise that surrounds us on a daily basis. I want to thank you so much for coming here and sharing your story with us.
My pleasure, Susan.
I'm excited about the work that you're doing. And I think that your story of really listening and leaving us, that corporate world that was no longer feeding your soul is really powerful. And I
Thank
know
you.
how it is. So, is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we end?
I just think, and I said this to Susan, for me, it was around legacy and what do I want to leave behind for this world? How do I want to make this world a better place? I want to leave an imprint that is positive. And I think we've all been put on this planet to do something like that. We all have gifts. If somebody or a corporation doesn't appreciate your gifts, don't lose those gifts. Those gifts are yours for a reason. That is what you bring. And I would just say, find where your place is where you know those gifts are going to be appreciated and useful for people. So I think that will bring you so much joy and peace in your life. It's like none you've ever seen.
Yeah, and and there's so many people that I think sometimes they're desperate to know their purpose. They don't, they're not really sure what they're passionate about. And a really beautiful exercise going back to writing. One exercise that some of you might want to try to get closer to what is your legacy is imagine that there's 100 people in a room after you've passed, and somebody that you love is reading a letter about the legacy that you've left behind. Write the letter. Just sit down in a quiet space. What do you want to be remembered for? Sometimes that can be little breadcrumbs that help us know what are we passionate about. Okay, well, with that, I am going to wrap this conversation up. And I want to thank all of our listeners. I hope that there are some little nuggets you can take with you wherever you are in your own grief and loss journey. And I love you guys. Thank you for showing up. And Caroline, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
My pleasure. Enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you. Okay, y'all. Bye for now. We'll see you next week.